Hello, thank you for joining me. Lynda Lamp here, and I'm joining you here today to continue our discussion of the book I've been reading, my book, Walking Through Your Walls, Loving Yourself and Everyone Else. This past Sunday, we read from the supplements section. We started the supplements section and we read all the way to supplement 5. So that means we covered sitting quietly with yourself, learning how to breathe, controlling your thoughts, and The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. So we'll open the discussion up with those topics, and then I have a couple of other things that we can talk about as well. And I did get an email with a couple of questions as well. I do have to apologize. Hi, Amber. I'm glad to have you here. That's great. And everybody else that's joined us, happy to have you here. I do have to apologize. I do not have my normal Lynda Lamp phone with me, the 907-351-3003. So we don't have that as a resource today. We'll have to rely on the chat feature on whatever platform you're on and hope that that's working. Let's see. So let me go to the email that I got. Okay, so there's a question about not taking things personally. And so they say, I've heard some spiritual teachers say that if someone is criticizing you and you feel a charge to react, or if it upsets you, then maybe there's something there you need to hear, because the Holy Spirit speaks through all of us. And if there wasn't something meaningful in what the person said or did, then you wouldn't be triggered at all. So that's got a lot of stuff packed into it. That question, because the Holy Spirit in and of itself sort of, I would put a box around that, and I want to talk about that separately. So if someone's criticizing you and you framed it that way, and I think that we can broaden that, right? I think it isn't just if someone's criticizing you, but let's talk about, because there's a lot of things happening when someone's criticizing you. First of all, in terms of relating it to the 4 agreements and not taking it personally, we have to realize that just the fact that they're criticizing you is a telltale sign about something about them, right? It's starting with them. Yes, you may have done something, but for them to feel the need to come and criticize you about what you did starts with them, not you, not with what you did. You have to deal with what you did. You don't necessarily have to deal with them because of what you did. That's not a given. So at the point where somebody's done something that then evokes the need in someone else to come and criticize them, the first reflection is going to be of the person doing the criticism. The manner in which they convey what the problem is, the tone, all of that is a reflection of them, not you. Now, what they say about the criticism, what they say about whatever it is you did, may be a reflection of what you did. It may be like a non-biased reflection of what you did, or again, it may be reflecting something in them that troubles them. At the point where you're hearing the words, now it becomes you and your response to what you're hearing. And this is the part that you can own. Now, if they say something to you and you get upset and you're not able to take it in a calm, neutral fashion, just to hear it, and you become triggered, now that is about you. At that point, that's about you. Your response is about you. What they've said to you is not necessarily about you at all. So I hope that helps to clarify that part of it. Yes, exactly, Amber. How you react is your responsibility. How you react is always. That's where our responsibility lies. How we react is truly the only thing we have any control over in this world. It's the only thing. We have no control over anything else other than our behavior and response to things. So I'm trying to, while I've been talking, I've been trying to think of a couple of examples that we could use. Criticize is a difficult word to start with, right? Because it's imbued with judgment. And so in general, as we're working on ourselves and trying to be, the best humans we can be in interacting with each other, criticizing people is probably something we want to let go of. We can share observations. We can share requests, right? I had an employee recently that resisted training. They complained that they never got trained, but at the same time, whenever anyone tried to train them, their response was, well, I did it this way because. And so in that case, they were not they were not open to any kind of feedback about what they were doing. And their response was truly all about them, right? Well, I did it that way because. And if the person was persistent and said, yes, I understand that, we'd still like you to do it this way, it would get met with a look and then no change in behavior, right? So it didn't get done the way they were being asked to get done. They just were stuck in their way and weren't open. That is not the best example of criticism. Excuse me, I'm going to have to take a little sip of something to wet my throat. It has still been cold here, so we do have the heat going again. Letting go of being critical of others. Yes, let go of being critical of others because it's judgment. And we have to come back. If you're going to live your life in the happiest way possible, embodying the understanding that everything is in divine order in every moment, you find yourself in a very peaceful place. And you look at things in a completely different way. You don't have that judgment. You're not being critical. And truly, if we were really embodied, we wouldn't complain about the weather. That's one where, unfortunately, I fail at on a routine basis. Not normally, but I think this particular winter has been extremely hard. And we're tired of it, tired of this weather. I want something different. I'm ready for something different. And what we resist persists, right? So am I contributing to our continued bad weather? I don't know. It's that it probably, in the grand scheme of things, probably. So that's the point, right? We're trying to get to this place of peace. Internal peace, where no matter what happens out here, our boat isn't getting rocked. We're able to move through this process of living in a body and experience it for what it is, not for what this third dimensional realm thinks it is. That's where we're trying to get. That's where I'm trying to show you is possible. Let me go back to this email and look at it again here. There are all kinds of ways that people criticize each other. A lot of times it's about appearances. Yes, love whatever rises. Whatever rises, love that. Absolutely. That's from Matt Kahn. Beautiful. Perfect, Amber. Thank you. Let's say somebody criticizes how you look. You know, let's say maybe you still live at your mother's house, your parents' house, and you're walking out the door and your mother looks at you and says, "You're not going out wearing that, are you?" Now, and I've probably made this example more complicated than it needs to be because you've got the mother dynamic, and I don't know that I needed to add that to it. Let's just stick to it. Doesn't matter who said it to you. You're not going out wearing that, right? Now, how do you respond? And who is that about? A comment like that is not about you. Yes, it's about what you're wearing, but the comment is not about you. It's about them. They don't want you going out like that. Why? That's their issue. That's their issue. You got dressed. You felt comfortable doing it. Do it. That's one of the things that happens. We allow other people to make us second guess our choices. And if you go back to sitting quietly and learning who you are, getting in touch with who you are and what makes your heart joyful, that's where you have to live from. And so when someone says something like that to you, the best thing you can do is say thank you for that feedback and go right about your way. Amber's sharing that she once had a boyfriend that said, "You're not wearing that, are you?" I had a boyfriend once that was compelled to take me shopping for better clothes. That wasn't about me. That was about him. Yes, I was a poor college student. I didn't have a lot of money to spend on clothes. But what it meant really was that he was embarrassed by dating a poor college student who didn't have money to buy clothes. He was embarrassed by me. That was why he wanted to go buy me clothes. That was about him, right? That's not about me. So I hope I've answered that part of it. Now, when you react to what they're saying, that is about you. And that's where you're reflecting yourself back to them. And again, if you get triggered, then that is an indication you've got something going on. And if we go back to it being the mother who said, "You're not going out like that," now you've got whatever that relationship and that dynamic is that probably contains a bunch of wounds. Our relationships with our mothers quite often are positive and negative. I always envied the people who had just positive relationships with their mom. That was always a mystery to me, since my relationship with my mother was mostly negative. But so again, I think I'm probably belaboring it at this point. So now in this email, it says, then maybe there's something there because the Holy Spirit speaks through all of us. So I wouldn't use those words. Divinity. We are all divinity. That to me, that teaching there to say because the Holy Spirit speaks through all of us, that actually, I feel like this is going to sound wild to say, but I actually feel like there's white supremacy built into that notion, because there's an excuse built into it, it sounds like to me, that it's okay. You know, we all get to have our voice because God speaks through all of us, right? And so if I'm criticizing you, I get to have that voice because God's speaking through me. And all of that is spiritual bypassing, all of it, right? You have to own it. We have to own ourselves in the interaction. And we are all divinity in form, but when we're speaking, that it's not divinity speaking through us. We are divinity in form speaking. That doesn't make it divine statements. So it, you know, no letting yourself off the hook because you're divinity. I hope that makes sense. So yes, thank you, Amber. I'm going to go on, I think, to the second. Yes, and you wouldn't be triggered. You shouldn't be triggered. However, I'll give you a different example, right? I use this example quite often when we're talking about how energy can impact us from what's around us, and can actually, if we give into it, allow our behavior to become altered. And so what I'm talking about is that collective field, right, that we live in. And if you get somebody, and it could be in this one-on-one where somebody's criticizing you, but it can also be somebody you don't even know, but just comes into your realm. So I'll give the abbreviated story of, I'm driving home, I'm in the middle of nowhere, and this vehicle comes up, and we're in a 45 double fine zone. And like out of nowhere, there's headlights behind me on my bumper. And I did what I normally would do, which is just sort of drift off onto the shoulder to let them go by. And as I'm doing that, I realize that my body is becoming absolutely enraged. My whole physical existence is tying itself into a knot of anger. And I'm aware enough to just observe it. I'm aware of it happening. It's like I was watching myself, right? And I get myself pulled over. And normally I don't stop. I just drift over, let them go by, and then I drift back out. And I've reduced my speed, but I haven't come to a complete stop. I felt the need to actually stop, because the overwhelming feeling that I had was I wanted to cut back out on the highway and floor it and get on that guy's tail end and put my high beams on and just be a horrible driver. And I had all of those feelings. Now, there's a teacher out there that would say, because I had those feelings, there's something in me that still needs healing. I'm not completely close to that idea, but it doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't feel right. What feels right for me to describe what happened in that moment was a truly physiological response from the housing within which I reside. We're wired certain ways: freeze, fight, or flight. And in this case, the fight impulse got triggered. My guess is that that person, again, they came from nowhere. They were going very fast to show up that way. People who are driving in that way are quite often, they're upset. Maybe there's an emergency they're trying to get home to. Who knows why they're driving that way? But there's an energy that they're carrying with them. And we know that our auric field spreads out and encompasses, according to the Heart Map Institute, in some cases, our heart coherence can be measured 18 miles away. So this person's aura is my theory about what happened. Their aura came into my field, and I started to pick up on their rage, their anger, their need to get wherever it was they were going. Because as soon as they passed, it passed in me, right? I just sat there for a moment or two, and that whole impulse to cut back out there and speed up and put my lights on, that all went away. That's why I don't think it's something that was in me. However, what I'll say is that if you have repeated incidences of something, the same thing, getting triggered in you from seemingly external things like that, but happening a lot, that would make me tend to think that there is something there in you as well, right? There can be two things going on at once. It isn't necessarily always one or the other of something. In this case, I think this was about them. Now, how I chose, had I chosen to cut back out and do what I had the impulse to do, whatever I chose, that would have been about me, right? Amber says, I hear a lot from spiritual teachers, if I'm triggered, there's something in me that needs healing. Again, you have to figure out where that trigger is coming from. So in this illustration that I just gave you, I felt triggered for a very short period of time. And my belief is that that was because a triggered wave encompassed me. Somebody who was triggered came into my realm, and my cells responded. My physical housing responded to that as an attack, basically. In the case where, so I'll give you an example of something that happened earlier today. I was on a phone call, and I had muted my phone. I mean, when I'm on a phone call, I'm very sensitive to the noises that I'm making, especially if it's my call, like it's my circle. I'm sensitive to the noises I'm making. At the same time, I've had the experience of being muted and not being able to make a comment in a timely manner. And then when I can, the thought is gone. Like I've lost it because I've been listening, and I lost, the moment was gone. And so in a particular period of time, while I was doing a specific task, prepping for this event right here, I had the phone unmuted for what was going to be about 10 seconds of perhaps background noise. I was trying to be very quiet. Somebody on the call almost immediately complained about that. And I muted myself, but I ended up not feeling well. And I ended up actually leaving the call. I left them to finish the call on their own because I got triggered. Something in me didn't feel good about the way that interchange had gone, and I wanted to give it attention. And so triggers come from within us. It's our body's way of telling us where we need to put our attention, where we have things that need clearing, that need help, that need healing. And ultimately, triggers come from unhealed wounds. That's where they come from. That's what they are. So in my unhealed wound, in that case, is probably not being appreciated. right? I became overwhelmed for a moment of, I try so hard, I give so much, and it's never enough. That was how my body reacted. So I knew in that moment, okay, you have something you need to deal with. So rather than just ignore it, I chose to take that time right then. We can't always do that, right? Sometimes we get triggered and we're in a situation where we can't just stop and say, I have to deal with my own, hurt feelings here. Let me get a time out. But it's important that we deal with them as quickly as we can and address them, because unhealed wounds become the barriers. That's what our walls are built out of, are our unhealed wounds. Every time something happens that reinforces something that's already happened, it's one more brick on the wall, right? And so you get to the point where you've got a great big wall like this, and now it's going to take a while. Let me go back to the email. Okay, moving on. The next question was about forgiveness. When we forgive, is it as simple as pointing to what someone did, be the bigger person, and let them off the hook? Or is it that nothing happens, so there's nothing to forgive? I believe the latter, but that's a tough pill to swallow. I really wanted to blame my abusers who caused my PTSD. Yes, so in the very ultimate sense of the word forgiveness, because everything is divinity in form, at that level, in form and function, at that level, there's never anything to forgive. It's the same level that Richard Bach, when he wrote Love Means Never Have, or Love Story, or Love, the line from Love Story, I think, love means never having to say you're sorry. There is a place where when you're coming from a place of wholeness and oneness, where both those sentences are true. It's a very elevated place, and very few people live from that place. That's where we're all trying to get. So in the functional state of forgiveness, you come to a place that, there's a mechanical process of forgiveness. We're taught there's a mechanical process. Somebody does something, it upsets you, you say something, the expectation is they say they're sorry, and the expectation is you forgive them. That's how it's supposed to work, right? It's all very manipulated. It's all very scripted. And it's many times very ingenuine. We see very few examples of true forgiveness. There have been some in some courthouses recently, and I'm not remembering. Yes, I think it was Breonna Taylor's brother showed a remarkable, I believe that was the right case, showed remarkable forgiveness to the police. And there have been some others. We don't see those levels of forgiveness very often. Yes, and Shabana is suggesting Ho'oponopono, which is a beautiful, beautiful process. I'm sorry, please forgive you. I love you. Thank you. I'm not sure I did those in the right order. Those are the 4 components of Ho'oponopono. So the ultimate place that you're trying to get is that place where we understand that everything is in divine order, that everything that happens to us is divinity's offering of something for us to experience. Yes, and Amber, I'm glad you love Ho'oponopono as well. And what you can do with Ho'oponopono is you can use it as a mantra. If you're really struggling to forgive yourself for something, and again, that's truly where it has to start, right? Because if you don't love yourself, you don't have love to give. And if you haven't forgiven yourself, how can you forgive anyone else? Because there isn't anything out here that isn't a reflection of what's in here. So loving yourself and forgiving yourself, right? These are the two cornerstones upon which all the other teachings follow. So using the tools, you can use Ho'oponopono like a mantra. You can just repeat it over and over to yourself, for yourself. We all do things during a day that, we could think back on and do better, right? And the tendency is for us to go to bed with those things in our head and beat ourselves up about, oh, I should have said this instead, or I should have done this instead, or why didn't I do this? Any kind of mental exercise like that is futile and destructive. So the best thing you can do, if you can't quiet your mind and just be still with your mind, which is very difficult, is to have something, make a tape to run in your head. And using Ho'oponopono is a perfect example of a great tape you can run in your head. I have one I've been using recently because they're numerologically tuned phrases. I love to run things through the numerology table and say phrases that tune to 9, which is the highest frequency single digit. So if I wake up in the morning and it's too early and I don't want to get out of bed, the tape I run in the morning is I am God in expression, in service, on purpose. So I am God in expression is a 99, and in service, on purpose is a 99. And so that's the highest frequency double digit, and it reduces to the highest frequency single digit. So, yes, Amber, I'm actually maybe I'm putting a book together because it would be a booklet. It's not that big, but it's a bit of an obsession for me coming up with numerologically tuned phrases. And I don't know if you haven't heard me say this, the word water that I use, all the phrases on my word water bottles now are all also numerologically tuned. So I think that makes them even more powerful. So what do you think about forgiveness? Is that enough? Do you does that answer the questions? That's great. Thank you, Amber. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be a booklet, but I'm working on it. A little more about forgiveness, just for to give me closure, I guess. The process of forgiving people, the things that they've done to you, can be an arduous task. And sometimes we pack these stories around that when we retell them, we get just as angry at the people in the stories as we were at the time. And I just want to suggest to everybody that when you find yourself doing that, and having that experience, write it down and then work on it, right? Take time to focus on what's going on with you about that story. Because for every angry coal we're carrying around, it's keeping us from taking that next step towards divinity and embodying and transmuting. So that it's, some people call it putting down the suitcase, right? We pack around all of these emotional wounds in a suitcase, or we hide behind a wall. Maybe we have a wall and a suitcase. There was a great band back in the 90s called Celestial Navigations, and they had a song about, and they were not song people, they were storytellers to music. And they had a song about a guy being in the valley and finding himself with these suitcases, all of his stuff. And each piece of stuff that he let go of, he grew a couple of inches taller. And so I always think of that, right? We lighten our load by letting go of these wounds that we carry around. And so you could still tell the story, but when you're telling it, you're healed when all you can do is laugh about it, when it doesn't actually invoke the emotions from the time that it happened. And all of those things are indicators of things that need healing. And so, you might find yourself with a long list. Don't beat yourself up over that. The first day you start is the day you start, and that's fine. And it's soon enough, whenever that is, because everything is in divine order, right? There is a timing of everything that's happening here, and we're not in charge. We're only in charge of us. Let's see what the notes say here. Remember who they are, divinity and form, because they have forgotten. If they remembered, they wouldn't misbehave. That's exactly right. It's exactly right. Amber, I have a wall, a suitcase, and 2 backpacks. Yeah. Don't we all? I mean, really, we all do. So let's see. I did have a couple of other things I wanted to, or I had made notes on. Okay. Love your ego. That's something that I don't think we can say enough. There's some real teachings out there that would make you think you're trying to get away from your ego, or separate, or quiet it, or in some way ignore it, or make it be quiet. And all of them will lead you down a path of confusion, I believe. We have 2 things going on when we say ego. There's the psychological Freudian ego that we hear about in school. And then there's the ego that is the actual wiring, housing center of our bodies. And I'm speaking of that ego. And most people are not speaking of that ego. Even spiritual teachers, they may say they're speaking of that ego, but they don't convey the teachings the way I've come to understand them. Right? We are not our bodies. We were given our bodies, or we picked our bodies, but we aren't our bodies. We reside within our bodies, but again, we are not our bodies. Just like you're not your house or your apartment or your condo. You live inside your condo or your house or your apartment or your car, wherever you live, but you're not that thing. Well, it's the same. We're inside this housing. And the housing's here to serve us. The housing is here to protect us. The housing comes with some wiring. Think of it as the alarm system of your dwelling, right? And it's got some very specific wiring, just like the wiring of a security system on a building. You want to know when somebody's coming in the door or the windows. You want to know when somebody's moving around the perimeter. You want to know when it gets too hot or when it's gotten too cold. And every time those things happen, this panel will make a noise and will go off. It's very similar with this housing that you're in. You're wired for, if someone frightens you, you have some wired responses. You're either going to run, you're going to freeze like a doe in the headlights, or you might choose to fight. All three of these things will happen unconsciously. Your response will be unconscious. Consciousness can kick in, but your initial response, and that's why when that guy's wave of energy came over me on the side of as I'm pulling over onto the side of the road and I'm feeling rage, when you're attacked, which that's how that felt, right? To my body, my ego's interpretation was I was being attacked. Here is this guy just attacking me on my tail end, being rude, getting on my butt, not driving appropriately. My housing's response was to want to fight, to make him miserable. That was the unconscious response of the housing. And so rather than not loving your ego, we need to learn to love our bodies and our housing and the way they work, the way they're intended, the wiring that they came with. Because it's only through understanding what's happening in the housing that you can in any way, shape, or form connect with your divinity. If you don't understand what's happening here, there will always be a disconnect. And so I can't urge you strongly enough to start to pay attention to what is your body doing? What are you feeling? How are you feeling? Because how you're feeling is your indicator. It is how you know what's happening with you. It's the only way to know. It's like you go over, in your house, if it's too hot or it's too cold, what do? You walk over to the thermostat and you look at it. What's going on here? You have to be able to look at what's going on here and understand it. Because if you don't, I can guarantee you your body, your house is running your life. And you don't want that, because it means that you're going through life in a rather unconscious way. For example, I hate to bring it up, but what just happened in Minnesota? What happens to people, in particular, Black people, when they are in the presence of policemen? It's a combination of not just their housing, but that collective that I'm talking about, that collective where the housing has all of the collective memory. And what is that collective memory, right? That Black men die at the hands of cops, even when they haven't done anything wrong. That put that young man into a panic. Because he is not aware of what his housing was doing, he gave into that panic. So that's why it's so important to become conscious of the fact that you live inside this housing that has a mind of its own. Only when you become one with that do you have a chance of becoming the embodied divine being, expressing and experiencing life as divinity would have it, right? And none of this is taught in schools. Every little kid should be getting told this, because we wake up in the morning and the first thing we tune into is how our body's feeling. And if our body isn't feeling well, we're not given the tools to help figure that out. We the first thing is, oh, you got to go see the doctor. No, that's why the very first supplement was sit quietly, learn who you are, figure it out, figure out who you are. And the only way to do that is to tune in and be quiet. So let's see. So is the ego neutral? Yes. Let's see here. Is the ego neutral? I believe so. Yes. The ego, I'm not sure I know what you mean in terms of the context of neutral. It is dedicated to keeping you safe and alive. That's what it's there for. Keep you safe, keep you alive. And protect you. Protect you from these, outside forces that seem so unpredictable. And they are, right? I mean, life is unpredictable. Neither good nor bad. Let's see. Yes, wouldn't it be great if we were all taught to listen to our body? No, there is no good or bad, right? There's no dichotomy here about the ego. There's actually no dichotomy about anything, because ultimately everything is a part of the same fabric. And so it's probably very new to some people to realize that we don't judge the ego. We should not be judging the ego. I know that from the psychological point of view, people will say, well, he's so egotistical, and that's a negative thing. Well, what are they saying when they say that? What they're saying is, here's somebody who seems to be functioning from a place of self-protection. Because that's the function of the ego, right? Self-protection. And so, yes, they might be pounding their chest and saying how great they are, but the underlying motive behind that is self-protection. So, Freud had great ideas, but he didn't have the whole picture. Just like most people don't have that whole picture of what's happening here in this physical realm, which actually brings me to the last, the ego as a thought system. Well, I think that's more the Freudian look at it, as opposed to, it's not a thought system at all. It's a wiring. That's that's where the difference really is. It's your wiring. But that leads me to this story that I wanted to talk to you about. The New York Times published an article the other day in the science section called Particle Physics, Muon, Fermilab, Brookhaven. So Muon, M-U-O-N, there's been some speculation for quite a while in the physics world that there's still something that they haven't found, right? That there's something else out there. And when they found the Higgs boson, which is a particle that gives mass to other particles, they thought that was it. But they've kept going. And now they've found this particle called a muon. And research into the particle's odd behavior suggests that there are forms of matter and energy that are vital to the cosmos, but not yet known to science. And I just want to bring that up because it is my belief and theory and experience that everything has consciousness. And there are physicists who are close to that, but I don't think there are any physicists out there who truly believe or could prove that consciousness is in everything. But I think that this discovery of the muon is extremely exciting because I think it's one more step closer to science catching up with what spirituality has known all along. That we are all one, that the fabric is all a fabric of divinity. So let's see. You're welcome, Amber. I'm glad it's interesting and helpful. We've got about not quite 10 minutes left. If anybody has any additional questions, let me go back to that email and make sure I've answered all of the, I think I did. I think I have. I can go back and say one more thing about, back on the subject of forgiveness, when we're talking about, blaming people for our illnesses, for example. What we can realize is that if everything is here for our benefit, then there was some benefit in the experience from which, or which caused the PTSD. And this is where it starts to get a little muddy for me, because I don't want it to ever sound like suffering is something that divinity has intended for us, because I don't think it is. I don't think it is. I think that what happens is when we come into this physical form, because we don't remember when we get here where we came from or how we got here, I think that, and because nobody's teaching us where we came from and how we got here and how all this works, I think that we experience things that divinity would not necessarily have asked for. But again, it's a playground. And even though there are things that are not playful or comfortable or good feeling, ultimately it's still just a playground. There isn't any finality here. There isn't anything that starts and ends here. You can't really do anything wrong, because when you die, your form will cease, the body, the wiring will cease, but you won't. You will return to the whole collective of divinity. And you'll decide at that point, what's next, right? This is a playground. We came here on purpose to have fun, to have the experiences that we desire. The fact that it's turned into this place of suffering and sadness is, I think, why I'm here to help fix it. I'm here to help say, hey, it doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be this. It can be a place of joy and of happiness. But this physical realm has caused the humans that have been here, who have forgotten where they came from and why they're here, to create something that now it's like a bunch of us are running around with our fingers in the dike trying to fix. Because love and wholeness is here. It is here. And it can be available to everybody if we will just wake up to it. None of these things that have happened, none of the things that have happened in terms of gun violence or racism or illness COVID, none of it need be happening. It's because we've forgotten. So in closing, I just want to, yes, let's wake up. Let's see, not the suffering, but I learned that I don't need to be a victim. Exactly. Yes, exactly. And that takes a real shift in focus, because we tend, if we've been in an abused relationship, we tend to take that on. When we're little, if we're around alcoholic parents, we tend to think it's our fault, right? We misunderstand our role in our relationships. And we do that from the very young age. And that's where these things like what are called core wounds come from. That phrase came up the other day on Facebook, actually. Someone who's been through an extremely traumatic situation, work situation. Someone suggested to them that they had a core wound they were dealing with. And it was a new term to her. Well, our core wound is like, it's the thing that broke us in this realm. And for many people, they have one. And it happened when they were little. Something that changed them forever in a way where they put up a wall, and maybe they put it in a backpack and put the backpack in a suitcase and then put that suitcase behind a wall. But they've blocked themselves off from this pain. And what happens is that anytime anything comes close then to triggering that, close to that pain, you get triggered. And it all comes back out. There's an easy explanation, I think, in the women's world, where you fall in love with a guy and then they break your heart. They do something and they break your heart. And what tends to happen is that becomes a core wound. Every other guy that woman dates will have to fight that core wound, because the tendency will be to expect him to repeat the behavior of the other guy. And what ends up happening is we create it, right? We create the thing to happen by expecting it to happen, right? We give energy to it by expecting it to happen. Now we've fed it. It's like a beast. You feed it, make it bigger. The more you expect it to happen, the more food you're giving it. And the other person quite often cannot sustain that energy that you keep feeding to this beast. And eventually they either leave you or they do exactly the thing that you were afraid of. Because at that point, they get to a point, well, why not? She's figuring I've done it anyway, so I might as well. See, it's all about the energy. So can a core wound be from a past life? I do believe that it can. I do believe that it can. And what will happen is, so that becomes the part of the cellular memory, right? Our cells have these memories. Even though our cells are new when we get this body, it doesn't matter, because the cells connect to the collective. And so if you had a lifetime where you were burned as a witch, you will have those experiences, or you will have that visceral response to anything that gets close to that topic in this lifetime, even though that occurred in some other lifetime. So what happens is there's an imprint that's already there, available to your cellular memory, from the other core wound, from a core wound from another life. And then if a similar thing happens in this life, it will stack on top of it, if that makes any sense. And that's why healing in this lifetime is so critical, because this is the lifetime you're in. So it's where you have the opportunity. But when you heal it here, you heal it across time, because there is no such thing as time, right? We're in a timeless life, even though in this 3D realm, or cosmology, I think was the word Neil Donald Walsh used the other day, because we're in this 3D cosmology, it looks like it's just here. But in actuality, all lives exist at the same time. And so when you heal anything in this life, you've healed it in all lives. It just speeds your transmutation and embodiment process. Okay, well, we've made it to 2 o'clock. It's actually a minute after. So I thank you so much for being here. I think if we look ahead, just to be prepared for Sunday, I think we're going to finish the book on Sunday. We'll get through the supplements, and there may be some appendices I read, but we'll be finishing up on Sunday. So we'll do a Q&A next Tuesday. And then from there, I'm going to drop the Tuesday events, and I'm just going to do, because it's going to be summer and things are going to be busy here with my lodging business and other things. And so I think once a week will be what I can manage for the next few months. Sundays, same time at 1 o'clock. And I'm not sure if we'll jump right into the chakras or if I may just do a, Sunday conversations about God and other things, or I don't know. I'm open to solutions or suggestions. In the meantime, you can email me questions at walkingthroughyourwalls.com or text me at 907-351-3003 or message me on any of these platforms, and I will respond. Again, namaste and much love. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time.